What was your paranormal experience? I'm a pilot. One time I was flying and I saw this bright orange glowing thing hovering over the trees. It was kind of bouncing around, like if you had a ball on an elastic string and you just bounced it around and whatnot. Anyways, since my course would have brought me near it, I asked air traffic control if they saw anything on their radar, which they said no. They asked me what I saw, so I described it and they said they weren't showing anything and were not aware of any military activity. The thing shot straight up and disappeared, so I told them it was gone. They asked me if I wanted to file a UFO report, which I said heck no, it's probably a weather balloon. Then I continued on my way. I know it wasn't a balloon, but I don't want the FFA questioning my sanity. What freaks me out is that we know very little about the ocean, but relative to us, the ocean is finite. What is behind the blue sky we see is infinite, and we know nothing about it. My grandfather was a pilot. One of his fellow pilots claimed to have seen the exact same thing, orange glowing thing sort of bouncing and hovering, and disappeared after a short while. Since the guy was tired from the long flight, he went and napped, and my grandfather drove over to find the area had a crater, and the trees hundreds of meters around the crater were knocked over, and there were massive amounts of radiation to the point where it was sickening to be around. After it was reported, no one was allowed near that crater. I personally think it might have been a weapon test, but I wouldn't put UFO crash into the conspiracy bin even now. I was visiting family and staying in a hotel with my boyfriend, husband now. The first night there, we went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night facing the window. I noticed there was a dark shadow in the corner of the room that looked human shaped. After staring a while, I realized it must have been a floor lamp since that corner was kind of bare, and that's the logical choice. I rolled over and went back to bed. The following morning, I remembered this and turned to look into the corner where the lamp was, and there isn't a floor lamp there. The corner is bare. I mentioned it to my boyfriend, and he went white. He told me that he woke up in the middle of the night because he felt like he was being watched and had to get up out of bed to go to the bathroom. I vaguely remembered him getting up to try to shake the feeling. It still sticks with me in dark rooms. Imagine the ghost reaction. Oh good, she sees me. Time to tear her. Wait, don't roll over. I'm right here. Hey, are you sleeping? Really? My father died less than 6 months after my daughter was born. She was not a good sleeper for her first year or so, waking up and screaming and crying at all hours of the night. My wife and I would trade times to get up and soothe her. One evening, not too long after my father passed, I was having a dream that my daughter was screaming in her bedroom. In the dream, I got up and went to her room, but before I got there, my dad came out of the room and just said, "She'll be okay," and kept walking away, and the crying stopped. I shot up and saw the baby monitor screen was on. It was on sound activated mode. The screen only comes on when a sound is over 60 decibels and goes off after 3 minutes of quiet. I get up and check, and she's fine and sleeping. A little shaken, it took me a bit to get back to sleep. I tell my wife about the dream in the morning. She told me she heard her crying, but I thought I'd gotten up to calm her. Still a vivid memory in my mind nearly 3 years later, seeing my younger looking dad coming out of her bedroom. I've had a similar one. Little bloke was 2. Woke up and could hear him talking, like having a proper conversation for that age. The light was on, which was weird, because there's no way he could reach the switch. He's standing up and looking directly at the chair we read bedtime stories on. In my sleep-aidled state, asked him who he's talking to, and he says, "I talking to Oma." I replied that his Oma was home in bed, with Opa asleep. Little fella says, "No daddy, your Oma. She says she misses you and mummy. My Oma died 5 years before he was born." A couple years ago, I had a dream reliving one of my childhood experiences, where I was playing with my cousin, and at the end of the dream, when he was getting ready to go home, I said goodbye to him, and for some reason, it felt different that time. A couple days later, he ended up passing away due to sudden death syndrome, basically a heart attack, but he was 25, so it was very unusual. 3 years later, to this day, every 2 to 3 weeks, I'm having very vivid dreams where I'm talking with him and having full conversations. My friend says it's my cousin reaching out to me, and while I don't believe that, I can't otherwise explain it rationally. Something I forgot to mention, he was born the same month and year as me, just 8 days apart. And so we'd been close friends since we were young kids. I had a friend who was very sick at the hospital this past spring. Not COVID, but sepsis, from an operation on his back. I went to bed, and in that in-between stage, when you're not awake and you're not quite asleep, I could sense him standing by my side of my bed. We said a few words to each other, and then he hugged me. When I woke up the next morning, I found out that he'd passed not long after I'd gone to bed. Many people would say it's just a dream, but I know better in my heart. I felt that he was actually there, and I felt the hug. He was one of the most caring and inspiring people that I'd known, and it was just like him to say goodbye to the people who loved him. Something similar happened to my mom when her dad died. No signs he was gonna die. He wasn't sick or anything, and he was young, but she saw him that night when she woke up in the middle of the night at the foot of her bed, a few states away where he lived. She found out the next morning he died suddenly in the middle of the night. My father is a complete skeptic, and yet also is one of the most open-minded people I know. He's very hard-headed and stubborn, and not prone to making things up for attention. When I was maybe 8 or 9, my mother, bro, father, and myself were all watching TV in the living room. Out of nowhere, he started bawling. Dad tears are no joke, especially a dad who had seen crime maybe 2 times prior. I remember him saying, "I just feel really, really sad all of a sudden. It's like someone passed through me." The next day, he found out his best friend Les had passed the night before, a few minutes before he began crying. I'm a skeptic myself, but we don't know half of the things we think we do. This world and all of its many spiritual nuances are amazing and incredible. I 100% believe you. I'll add my own in here. I once was laying in my bed, with my dog at the foot of it. I was on the cusp of sleep when suddenly, my dog pops her head up and locks onto something in the middle of my room. Her head then slowly turns and follows something I can't see. Her head stops again, and my backpack gets knocked over. After having been in the same spot for hours, then all of a sudden, a loud bang on my bedroom window. I was on the second floor of the house. I ran out of that room so quick without daring to look at that window. One possible reason why a window or door might make a sudden bang is temperature change. If exposed to rapid heating or cooling, the wooden frames can push against the door or window, making noise. Not mine, but one I think of a lot. I was at work one night, and my mom was visiting my newborn son and wife. I get home and my mom tells me she heard my dad talking to my son. My dad died 8 years prior, but she swears up and down it was his voice. My wife heard it too, but never met my dad, so she couldn't say much about it. Just that it was a man's voice. Then it happened again, when my daughter was born. I really want to say my dad is watching the kids grow up, but I'll never know. My sister's husband died when her daughter was 1.5 and 3 years old. For about a year afterward, she would catch both kids looking from the living room to the landing at the top of the stairs and waving or answering questions. She would ask them what they were doing, and the oldest would say, "Just talking to Daddy." The only paranormal thing that has happened to me, and I really don't know how it was possible, happened at my aunt's place when I was a kid. Every once in a while, we went to her house and stayed the night, and I always ended up sleeping on the couch/sofa. Well, this was an old house with a room full of creepy dolls and the likes, but with those nothing weird happened, although my cousins would say the dolls move around. It had 2 floors with a stair in the middle that ended right where I would usually sleep. So every time the moment everyone was asleep and no other sound was heard, I would invariably hear a marble being dropped from the stairs until it rolled down the floor. And it would repeat 5 through 6 times every night. No one plays with marbles. Everyone was asleep, so to this day, I can't think of a reason for that to happen. was walking on the street and saw an old man walking in the opposite direction. He was looking up at an old house. As I was walking, I looked to the ground, and when I looked up again, he was gone. It was impossible for him to disappear so fast by natural means. I got scared but continued walking, pretending I didn't notice anything. Back when I lived in my very first apartment, I would hear what sounded like a little child calling for their parent. Now at first, I thought it was genuinely some kid who is lost because the complex was big enough for a kid to wander off from their parents. But the voice seemed to always be right next to me. It wasn't until I moved out that I found out a little girl was killed by her abusive father in the 80s. TLDR, little ghost girl was calling for her dad. I don't know if this is paranormal, but it's definitely a bit freaky. So it was just a normal night. I go to bed, I'm still a youngish kid, and I end up having a dream. So it was my uncle who came to me in this dream, and his face was caved in, and he had blood all over him. His arms and legs were broken, all this gory stuff. Anyway, I have this dream, and he says to me, "Take care of your mother." Anyway, Mom comes and wakes me up in the middle of the night, and she's crying and upset, so I get out of bed and comfort her. She tells me she got a call from the hospital saying that my uncle has died in a motorbike accident moments earlier. Anyway, for about a week after that, Mom was quite upset, and then maybe 10 or so days later, Mom tells me she had a dream that my uncle visited her and apologized to her, and then drifted away. Anyway, I believe it's a year later, and it's his death day. Mom lights a candle to celebrate and whatnot, and I saw my uncle sitting on the couch, watching over my mom. I didn't know what I was seeing, but it just disappeared into thin air. It was almost like I had a sixth sense. Weird he posted this today. I'm a real estate broker and flip houses. We buy old beat up houses. Some of them are the worst of the worst as you could imagine. Anyway, we bought one and went to see it today. It had been vacant for 10 years, and when we went inside, there was a blood stain on the floor. Come to find out that somebody killed themselves in that house 10 years ago. Pretty creepy. My partner and I were taking walkthrough videos to share our contractors and get rehab estimates. Both of us independently took videos, and both of our phones shut off when we pan over to the area with the blood stain where the man died. This is going to be a weird rehab. When we first moved into our old house, our uncle gifted us 2 puppies, Labrador retrievers. I named one Charlie. My brother named the other Gordo. A few months later, they both got parvo. Charlie ended up dying from it while Gordo survived. More time passes, and I don't remember what we were celebrating, but I remember being the only one inside the house. Everyone else was in the backyard, around my dad who was BBQing. I was sitting on the couch, where you could see the glass sliding door in the kitchen, and I could see outside. The door was closed. I got up to go to the bathroom. I was right at the end of the hallway when I felt Gordo jump on the back of my legs. He pushed me so hard, I remember I stumbled forward, I turned around to pet him, and there was nothing there. And the sliding door was still closed, and everyone was still outside. I was sitting on the toilet, wondering what had just happened. To this day, I still tell myself it was Charlie, but I will never actually know. So me and my buddy are 14-ish. We were sitting in his living room, playing Pokemon and watching TV, when out of the blue, his sister, who was 15, comes running in the room crying like a 3-year-old who dropped her ice cream cone. After a short time, she calms down enough to get us to follow us in her room. She was in an AP flute class and had to record herself playing some music. She had left the record button playing, and in that blank space she had recorded, a clear as day young female screaming. Now this was not a ghost story. Random bit of sound. This was obviously a young female screaming. He had a big fenced yard, and next to her room was the garage. There's no way someone outside of the house could have screamed and been recorded that clear. Her sister did not sleep in that room for 6 months. She deleted the recording that night to our disappointment. It wasn't me, but my dad. He was working under our car while me and my sister were playing in the house. This was years ago, by the way. And a car pulls up playing some rap music. My dad assumes it's my older brother, and greets him without looking out from under the car. He gets out of the car and walks into the house without saying a word, and my dad just goes back to work. A few minutes later, my brother pulls up. "Hey, Dad." Well, I'm not sure if it's really paranormal, but I have a weird instinct. For example, when I was a teen, I missed my job 3 times just because I couldn't force myself to go. Every time there was a shooting, either at my job or on a route I would have taken to get there. Another time, out of the blue, I decided at the last minute to spend the night at my aunt's place for the first time. So I informed the people I used to carpool with every day and get out of the car. Important information. I get car sick, so my place is always backseat, passenger side. Well, when I meet my friends the next day, they tell me they were in a pretty bad accident, but nobody is hurt. A car hit them while in the highway, and the back of the car, passenger side, was wrecked. Have I been there? That would be the end of my story. And the last big incident was when I decided I didn't want to go on a boating day with my friends. No matter how much they insisted or how much I usually enjoy those, I just didn't want to go. Well, the girl they invited to film my spot hurt herself on a loose nail, ripped her leg open, and had to go under 4 surgeries to reconstruct the flesh on her leg. Now I really don't want to go somewhere or do something. Trust me, I don't. I was hanging out on a friend's back porch faced out over a small creek valley of open space. A blue-green ball of light came zooming in over the open space from the left and stopped about 100 feet away, maybe 40 feet off the ground. It was maybe the size of a softball. Then it zoomed over to about 15 feet away and 15 feet up in the air and stopped for about 2 breaths. Then it shot straight up into the sky and was gone in less than a second. The way it moved was weird too. It didn't hover or drift at all. It just went from one point in space to another and then stopped. Not like it vanished and reappeared. I mean, it moved so fast, it kind of looked like that. But there was not slowing down or speeding up. It just went. All 4 of us saw it. We talked about it a little bit, not much. Just kind of sat with the realization we'd been inspected by aliens. Oh, I have a few. I'll go with this one though. I went to the movies with my pals in high school and carpooled with a few to get there. I drove. The film? The Evil Dead. Movie ended. They were all going to get some food, but I had to get home. The guys I drove were going to go home with some of the others. It was getting late, so I took the back roads that I knew I could speed on. I get onto X road that's like 6 miles long, and someone had his brights on. I flashed him a few times, still on. It's taking a while to get past this guy. Normally it's 10 to 15 seconds of being blind, tops. But this time, it was nearly 45 seconds to a minute before I get close. I slowed down to see what was the matter, and the car was idling down the shoulder of the road. All 4 doors open, dome lights on, nobody inside. Nobody was anywhere. If the movie I saw was a Disney flick, I'd have stopped to see what was wrong and if anybody needed help or an ambulance. But in this situation, I opted to floor it and get the hell out of there. Not exactly paranormal, but definitely not normal either. I don't know if this qualifies as paranormal per se, but I was home alone one weekend and decided to make myself scrambled eggs for breakfast. Took a full carton out of the fridge, grabbed an egg, cracked it, went to grab a second egg, only to notice the carton was full again. I just stood there and stared at the full carton for a few seconds, expecting one to disappear maybe? I don't know. Then I just threw them all out. Wasn't gonna fuck around with phantom eggs. There is probably a rational explanation, but I know what I saw. I can see the future sometimes. It's fucking weird as shit. Not like deja vu, but also exactly like deja vu at the same time. I'll have a dream and not think about it, except, oh, that was pretty realistic. Then what happened in the dream will actually happen. It's usually like 10 seconds. I don't really talk about it though, because people will think I'm insane or exaggerating. It's fucking weird. Happens like once or twice a month. Dude, me too! It's usually random shit, like me sitting down watching a specific episode of something. I'll brush it off the next day, and as soon as it happens, I immediately remember that I had dreamed about this. Just comes to show that the future is already written. My sister had a horse doll that moved around on its own. Needless to say, We were both freaked out. No way someone was moving it, because nobody was around to move it at 4 a.m. when I decided to fact check her theory. Due to high demand, I figured I'd elaborate a little further. My memory is fuzzy, because this all happened over a decade ago. Anyway, here's those extra details. To fact check whether or not my sister was telling the truth, I went around the house at night looking for the horse doll. I found it in her room. I went back to my room, tried to get back to sleep, and decided to double check. Went to her room, and it was gone. I didn't hear footsteps or sounds of movement, so I doubt anyone was moving it. Like the curious kid I was, I went around the house looking for it. I found it in the living room. I ran straight back to my room and didn't sleep the rest of the night. Got a second-hand mattress when I turned 5/6. Started having the same dream every night of a lady coming out of a house in the woods and screaming at some kids playing in a sand pit out the front. For 2 years, I had the same dream and could even hear the woman screaming while I was awake. Mom ended up giving the mattress away to her skeptic friend who needed it for her son. I stopped having the dreams, and the friend's son started waking up with night terrors. TLDR, had a haunted mattress. I was asleep and experiencing sleep paralysis, so dreaming/hallucinating. A boy at the end of the bed was taunting me with poking my foot. He hadn't quite touched my foot yet, but was going to. It carried on for a while. I couldn't move. Then he hit my foot, and at that exact moment, my partner kicked me in the foot in her sleep. I've never been able to figure out how my hallucinating matched up with a real-life, real-time moment. I considered it to be paranormal. The documentary The Nightmare talks about shared sleep paralysis. Great doc, but can be scary if you've had bad night terrors. I've had my own before. My ex and I were asleep. Across from the bed was a hallway with closets on both sides. I started having a night terror when something in the closet was trying to get out. At the same time, my ex was saying, "They're inside the closet. They're trying to get out of the closet." Then we both woke up and she immediately gasped and rolled towards me, saying there was a dark figure walking down the hall. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I was on the road with my family and our small dog. It was cool outside, so we decided to leave our dog in the vehicle and eat at a nearby restaurant. I was sitting in the restaurant for about 15 minutes when I was hit by a feeling that something was wrong with our dog. I was sure of it, so I told my wife that I had to go check on the dog. I walked back to our car. It turned out that she had wandered into the back of our vehicle and stepped on my daughter's fishing rod, embedding the entire fish hook in her leg. I had to take her to a local vet for emergency surgery. I don't know if this is paranormal, but I find it strange. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't believe in ghosts at all. But one night, a couple months ago, I was washing a dish in my sink when suddenly, 2 wrinkled hands with long nails grabbed my ankles and yanked backwards, hard. I dropped the dish and cried out in surprise, but the hands weren't there when I turned around. It happened at an angle that was impossible unless the person was laying on their stomach behind me. No markings were left on my ankles, but I felt it for sure. So I was walking downstairs one morning and stopped after 2 to 3 steps when I heard the sound of a cabinet open and closing. I looked at the kitchen and saw a cabinet opening and closing. And then the previous night, I stayed up late with one of my cousins and her friend, and I swear to God, while we were seeing what would happen if we turned off the lights and just sat there, I heard something call out my name. And when I went to bed that night, I had a dream where there was just me writing all over the walls saying, "Watch out." What spooks me out more is that the day after the cabinet incident, my drug addict mother was found overdosed on the bathroom with needles around her. I always thought there was some sort of being trying to warn me of what's to come. I had a vivid dream where a strange little girl, I can't make out now, told me that my wife stopped smoking and drinking. I told my wife about it. She agreed to take a break with me because we had been partying a little more harder than normal. Well, a month later, and she is late, and we found out that the day after we conceived was the night I had the dream. My daughter is nearly 8 months old now, and she's the best. Me and some of my siblings were playing Xbox, and we all had pain on our arm at the exact same time. We looked down and saw a cut there. We all noticed it was in the exact same place for all of us. I have quite a few ghosts. Seems to me like the last house had one in it. I am a teacher, and the last school I worked at had a ghost there. I was there in the evening, filling out subplans as my son had gotten sick. I hear a ripping sound and see the corner of one of the posters on my wall hanging down. It then started shaking and gets quickly pulled off the wall, traveling across the room. This was the first of many instances I had with this particular ghost. This happened about 6 years ago, when I was 12 or 13. I was watching a lot of horror movies, and watching a lot of horror games on YouTube. I live in a 2-story house, so this made it even worse for me. I had just watched The Grudge, I think. I had an alarm set for 5 a.m. because I wanted to play video games before school. I got up to turn my alarm off. When I heard my bed creak, I slowly turned around to see what it was, and I just see something under my covers and legit walked out of my room with no hesitation and went to my younger sister's room and went back to sleep. I was having none of that, lol. My grandmother passed away from cancer at a young age. I was around 6 when this happened. I had always stayed over at her house on weekends. There were a couple of times where I felt as if someone was watching me over the years. A couple of years passed by, and I was staying there with my cousin one night. We were watching some late night HBO, what we weren't supposed to be watching. There's a very distinct sound my grandfather's kitchen floor makes when you walk on it. We both heard it and immediately looked at each other, with eyes as wide as they'd ever been. The room got incredibly cold to the point where we could see our breath. In the hallway, leading to the bedrooms, we saw something standing there and heard someone yell in a very raspy voice my grandfather's name. And then, a flash, and it was gone. I was 6 months pregnant when my mom got ill. I was homeless and staying in a bedside and sheltered accommodation, which was sparsely furnished, as it was a go, between while I found adequate housing. I literally had a sofa and a bed frame with a blow-up mattress on it. I remember a few days after she passed, I was laying on the bed crying, facing the wall, when the mattress shifted. I raised up a few centimeters on my side, as if someone had come and lay on the other side next to me. I remember feeling terrified for a good few minutes, and then all of a sudden, had this wave of calm wash over me, as I managed to get some sleep. I feel like she came to stay with me that night, because she knew I needed her. When I was 11, I attended a sleepover with my girls' group. At one point in the evening, in this big church hall, we decided to try levitating people. 9 of us stood around Tammy, who lay on a mattress at our feet. We did our little chants. By the power of levitation, may she rise! Touched our pinky fingers to the edges of her body and gently pushed upwards. And she rose. I swear to God, she rose. Easy as can be. We had her prone self up at shoulder height, like she was nothing. As soon as we realized what was happening, we all screamed and she dropped like a rock onto the mattress. It was like the weirdest thing that had ever happened in my life. And surely in Tammy's. None of the adults believed us the next day, and no one I know has believed me ever since. Hysterical girls, you probably just lifted her. But we all knew, and I still remember it clearly. It's one of those things you don't forget. I'm not sure if this counts, but I was sleeping and looked up to see myself laying in bed, and it freaked me out. I woke up and looked at the foot of my behind, and I swear I saw myself while awake.